8 ancient Gnostic women leaders. Number 1. Salome, disciple of Jesus in several Gnostic texts, including the Gospel of the Egyptians, founder of the Carpocratian Gnostic sect. Number 2. Marcellina, founded Gnostic church in Rome in the 2nd century, taught social egalitarianism and led multitudes away from orthodoxy. Number 3. Helen, one of the 30 disciples of John the Baptist, consort of Simon Magus, high priestess of the moon, and later leader of her own sect. Number 4. Miriam, 1st century seer and priestess from the Euphrates marshes, who founded a group of Gnostic Baptists that evolved into the Mandeans. Number 5. Mary Magdalene, main disciple and companion of Jesus, seer in her own right, honored by several Gnostic communities and in apocryphal texts. Number 6. Miriam, disciple of James the Just and founder of the Nassenes or serpent-worshipping Gnostics. Number 7. Mary the Jewess, quoted by Gnostic mystic Zosimos of Panopolis. She was an inventor and is considered the first true alchemist of the Western world. Number 8. Jezebel, Nicolaitanian leader mentioned in the book of Revelation, prophetess and seductress, whose teachings included the deep things of Satan. Data taken from church father accounts, Christian folklore, and apocryphal texts, including the Nag Hammadi Library, as well as the Gnostic New Age by Dr. April DeConnick, a dictionary of Gnosticism by Andrew Phillips Smith, and The Other Goddess by Dr. Joanna Kuyawa. The very women of these heretics, how wanton they are, for they are bold enough to teach, to dispute, to enact exorcisms, to undertake cures, it may even to baptize. Tertullian, Prescription Against Heretics, 41. Where there is smoke, there is the fire of ancient priestesses that cannot be contained by the simulation. Sophia Rising. For more Gnosis to expose the simulation, visit the Virtual Alexandria, thegodabovegod.com. Heresy shouldn't be this much fun, but it is. It just is, especially when you get this video I just made, or actually I made it a while ago, but I was waiting for the perfect opportunity to play it, and this was definitely the show. And I understand probably many are thinking, are making good cases, are some of these leaders historical, it's just folklore. But I think the point I wanted to make with this is that I could have brought 7 or 8 more of these female figures. And I think one of the things that's remarkable about Gnosticism is their, you might say, egalitarian, or way that whoever's best for the job can do it. That they had no problem with these women leaders and figures and exemplars. And you don't see it really in any movement throughout history. I think even modern movements like Thelema, Wicca, witchcraft, theosophy don't even have half of these exemplar Gnostic women. So I wanted to again show another dimension of what we do here at Virtual Alexandria. My name is Miguel Connor, and I am your Pompatus of Gnosis. So good to see everybody who is here live, and I hope you're doing well. And it's always an honor and a pleasure to have Dr. David Litwa with us. David, how are you? And what do you think of the video?
Good, thanks. Well, I think it's a real treasure that you're putting emphasis on women. Marcellina is very, very dear to my heart. I have studied her for many years and published on Marcellina, but I'm really, really pleased that all of these women are being acknowledged. I mean, the question of folklore or not, just naming them is significant. You know, it makes a statement, it makes a political statement. and often fiction is twice as true as fact, or twice as powerful as fact. I think, yeah, you're making a statement that is so helpful. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. And yes, I know. Yeah, I know. Marcelina always hit a spot. She's your heroine of all times, and amazing. And your book on her is just an excellent book. And really, again, her story is remarkable, right, David? It's hard to find in history, even in modern times, such a figure that can move mountains. I mean, you have to look at Blavatsky or somebody like that, a founder of a movement that was so
Yeah.
successful.
There's a funny story about that. So I was approached by the Brill Encyclopedia of Early Christianity to write the entry for Marcelina.
Mhm.
And I did, and I turned it in, and the editor got back to me and said, "Oh, you got a whole bunch of things wrong. And because you don't mention her relationship with Gregory of Nyssa um, and Basil of Caesarea." And I'm like, you obviously don't know anything about the second century because you are mixing up a fourth century
Yeah.
system of the Cappadocians with the second century leader, Carpocratian leader in Rome. And so it's funny that even the editor of this Brill Encyclopedia, who wasn't the one who asked me to write it, but even the editor didn't know who this woman was. I mean, that shows you a lot. And anyway, but
Yeah, yeah. Well,
there you
that's what we're here for. We got to give some more exposure to these very cool chicks who've done so much. And with us too, always good to see the Moondog Vans. Vans, how are you doing?
definitely.
Great today. I'm glad to see Dr. Litwa on today, and looks like your new book is going to be a real winner. A lot of people will appreciate knowing the ins and outs of Gnosis, explained in a very direct and powerful way. And I can't help but notice that all the chicks of Gnosis are hot. They're hot, hot, hot.
In my mind, sorry, I'm still a male. I'm not gonna change.
Well, there's a
it's not-
Platonic interpretation of that, because if you have internal beauty, that should show up on your external features.
Mm.
Of course, that doesn't really play out exactly in the world, but it is true that, yeah, it's why Jesus can beam with light. The beauty, the internal beauty shines out. So I think that's a nice interpretation, actually. I mean, you're definitely bringing that sexual energy in there, but I think the idea of Gnostic beauty, and it's very Plotinian in the sense that we are attracted to the truth and to the light, and so those who teach the truth and the light are also attractive.
Mm.
Take it as you will.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, I won't rest until we can have these Gnostic heroines. And like, remember those George Michael 90s videos with the supermodels like Freedom 90 and all those? We should have one of those. Those were great
That
videos,
would be
great times.
distinctly your style.
Cindy Crawford all the way will be Marcelina, David, just for you.
So the pleroma is going to be a giant disco, right?
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. And yes, for the audience, Understanding Gnosis, as I was telling Vince, is my favorite book this year. Probably my favorite book since 2025. It was an excellent read. It's short. It breaks everything down. And what I love about David is he brings a lot of empathy. He's trying to find out what these people were struggling with, what they were desiring, what their traditions were, what their hopes were, even their insecurities. So thank you, David. Yeah, I love how you bring, it's great scholarship, but you do always bring a lot of empathy into these figures, because at the end of the day, they were like us. They were just trying to figure shit out, right? Why am I here? What's the world about?
Well, that's right. And, that's really the problem with modern scholarship on Gnosis. Like, if you go get an intro to Gnosis, you've got a lot of people who don't have that empathy. And are even confused about whether they should be using the term Gnosticism, and they end up like apologizing to you in the introduction and bending over backwards to try to sound cautious. But yeah, at the end, it's really about honoring real people who had real experiences, and so yeah, we need to find a language to do that. And so it's only 140 pages. And I was telling Miguel and Vance that if you want an e-copy, I can get it to you easier or cheaper, I should say, than the Amazon Kindle. So you don't need to, deal with the devil if you don't want to. So anyway, take it away.
Yeah. Vance will be putting it in the chat. I will put it in the show notes, whether you're listening audio or on YouTube. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to read it again because again, it has a lot of good stuff. And yeah, I would say, why don't we start from the beginning? And again, you tackle all the relevant Gnostic lingo and concepts, and obviously one of them, and that's important because again, it's not like Simon Magus and Valentinus are walking down the street and like, oh, I have Gnosis. There's a context, a history, a psychology. It just didn't come out of a vacuum as much as we'd all like to receive Gnosis that way. So it starts with the divine spark, and it's interesting because, as you say, this idea of us having a piece of the Godhead that we can access is not as alien as some might think. And you go back to the Sumerians, Mesopotamia, where you talk about the epic known as Astrahasis, where a god is sacrificed to bring about the world, to bring about humanity. Reminds me of the movie Prometheus. If you watched it, where the first engineer has to sacrifice himself to bring about humanity, and then there's another god, Tengu, and the Enuma Elish, who has to be sacrificed. So this was something in the air. As I always say, the Gnostics were not just sitting there like giggling, writing science fiction. They were just looking at the world and older traditions and honoring them.
Right. Well, yeah, it's always like in all, human history, it's a mix of experience and a mix of the tradition that you inherit. And yes, it's not like the Gnostic experience, it can be, isolated to one particular time. It is in a sense transhistorical, but yeah, there is something going on in second century Alexandria that is bubbling. And that's very, very important to kind of really focus in on. But yeah, these older traditions where in Mesopotamia, as well as Greece, you have Dionysus being ripped apart by the Titans, and then his flesh, which is pieced back together, but out of the ash, like the Titans eat Dionysus, and then they are blasted to bits. And so Dionysus is in them, and it's in the ash, and out of this ash, humans are created. This idea that there are like those gold flecks in mud, that's just a metaphor, of course. There's many ways to conceive of the divine spark. It's not necessarily like it's a literal substance, but that's like part of the analogy, where it's a way to think of something, sort of like even in the Nicene Creed, you have Jesus as homoousios with the Father. He's got some ousia, he's got some substance in common with the Father, and people were very afraid that might be taken in the wrong way. But that's essentially, the Gnostics came up with that term. Homoousios is their term. And it ends up in this creed, which has defined orthodoxy for all time. But what orthodoxy does is it limits that divine spark to Jesus, whereas originally that divine spark is everyone's share. Thanks to Jesus. We're not, throwing him out, but he's the one who told us about all this.
Who came up with the term? Do we know who came up with the term?
It actually shows up in the Vassilides report, in the Refutation of All Heresies. So it shows up in Valentinian sources as well. There's a great article that I've got a database online called the Gnostic Archive, and so if anyone wants to just like get up to speed on the scholarly books and articles on Gnosis, you can join for free. A lot of the articles are just free, and I'm just basically summarizing the scholarship. There's a great article on the Gnostic homoousios, and yeah, the earliest attestations of that term, which became part of the Nicene Creed, that of the same substance. That's all Gnostic. That's the Gnostic invention, and that's a great example of how orthodoxy really wants to mask its its stance and say that, oh, well, we're against Gnosticism. But how can you be against Gnosticism if you've adapted so much of it and renamed it and shifted things around? That itself is a very shifty kind of mode of perception, and it's a misperception. We call that misrecognition.
Yeah, they certainly borrowed. I mean, obviously, the Gospel of John was for the Valentinians wrote the exposition first on it. Paul is definitely semi-Gnostic. He's out there wondering about Archons and all these concepts, and of course, as you quote in First John, is I think very Gnostic. Like you say, he talks about the evil one controls the world. So these ideas again were not controversial, were they, David? It's almost in the air. I mean, with the Book of Enoch and all that, it wouldn't have like made anybody say heretic back in those days.
Right. Yeah. I like to say the Gospel of John, it like catches the Orthodox with their pants down, because people talk about the Gnostic Gospels, but wait a minute, John is a Gnostic Gospel. That one just happens to be tucked into the canon. I mean, and of course, yeah, there's been 2,000 years of people trying to tell us that it's Orthodox, but it's Gnostic through and through and through. It's a divine redeemer who comes out of the heavenly realm. He's not even born. He just shows up in the flesh and he's like, hey guys, I got a message. And guess what? The kingdom is around, it's all around you, and it's not of this world. And I'm going back up to the Father, and you're coming with me. If that's not Gnostic, I don't know what is. I like. Anyway, yeah, people love to kind of tame that. The Orthodox love to kind of tame that. The chains of the Gospel of John are the synoptics. That's to chain that down. But in the end, yeah, truth won't be chained.
Exactly. So let's talk about the spiritual tech called Gnosis. As David Brackey said, Gnosis is the one thing that's not exclusive to the Gnostics, because obviously the Hermetics, Neoplatonists, the Orthodox, right? Irenaeus, this is Gnosis falsely called. He's saying they got the wrong Gnosis. We got the right Gnosis. Clement of Alexandria and so forth. So it was a spiritual tech, but what would you say separates how the Gnostics viewed Gnosis from other groups around them? Like you said, in this wonderful stew called Alexandria in the 2nd century.
Yeah, well, definitely Gnosis isn't a bad term for anyone in antiquity. I mean, even Irenaeus' statement that Gnosis falsely so called assumes that Gnosis is something good. He's just saying that, oh, well, they're just falsely using that good name. But yeah, he's assuming that it's something good. And really all Christians claim to have Gnosis. But the difference in what I'm trying to argue in the book is that some people claim to have spiritual insight that leads to salvation. Pretty much all Christians do that. But what makes Gnostics different is that becomes a mode of knowing, that is a transcendent mode of knowing and an experiential mode of knowing, by which they, quite by serendipity, learn truths, transcendent truths. It's as if the real smashes all the masks that we're wearing and smashes into the glass of our fake realities. It breaks into the matrix and starts screaming at you. And the knowledge that you get from that experience, that's what's called Gnosis. But Gnosis is also a mode of knowing. In other words, you can't really have Gnosis unless your normal frontal cortex is completely scrambled or put to sleep, as it were, and you enter into a higher state of transcendent knowing. So that, I think, I'm not sure I'm completely original in saying that, but Gnosis as a mode of transcendent knowing is the difference that makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. At the same time, what separated, again, the Gnostics was the idea of how they viewed the managerial class, the heavenly managerial class, or the CEO of this universe, because again, the Demiurge in around them, whether it's Neoplatonism, even Justin Martyr calling Jesus the Demiurge of God. The Demiurge was seen as this really cool guy, but the Gnostics said, no, all these lower beings are, deficient at best. They're inept at best, but evil at worst, right? So that's where they really separated from many of the other groups.
Well, yes, I would say yes and no. I mean, demiurgy is really a common idea. Demiurgy is just the idea that says that the true God isn't the dude who made the material world. And so are that. I would say even Orthodox Christians are that, because if you look at early second century, or really any second century source, they're all not saying that the Father took, his bare hands and started making grass and trees. They're all saying that the Logos did that. And in fact, that's the Gnostic doctrine of John, that he's the Logos and through him the world came to be. So they all have that mediator figure coming in the middle. And that's the demiurgic figure. So I don't make the argument, and this is a trap that a lot of people fall into. They think that, well, demiurgy is an essentially Gnostic trait. No, it's really not. It's one of many. What makes a Gnostic is they combine the traits, right? So Valentinus, is going to be different from the Sethians. They're both going to have demiurgy, and they're both going to combine it with the divine spark and the God human, and that's what's going to make them Gnostic. On the issue of demiurgy itself, they're all going to come down on different areas as well, because Valentinus is going to be, okay, demiurge is fine. He's got a lot to learn, but he's not a bad guy. And of course, the Sethians are like, oh yeah, he is. And Marcion is like, oh yeah, he is. So they really disagree on that point. But again, it's demiurgy is something that, again, in Alexandria, like pretty much everybody's a demiurgist. Like it's only the 20th and 21st century evangelical Christians who think that the high God, steps down and starts molding the clay with his bare hands.
Right.
First of all, no one in antiquity thinks that God has bare hands. I mean, but yeah, I mean, they are so much more sophisticated than any of us are. They would never get into a debate about whether there were 7 literal days of creation. I mean, that's just so passé to them. So yeah, it's all in the mix, and the Gnostics are Gnostics because they combine the different features in their own way.
No, that certainly makes sense how they saw different things. And as you write in your book, it's almost like to the Gnostics, it would be irrelevant. It's almost something they talked about while having coffee at Starbucks in Alexandria about how evil the Demiurge or the Archons, because once you have Gnosis and you're awakened, you're superior to these Archons. They can't touch you, right? You have the passwords, you've got the divine spark. It's almost like you've accepted it, but you're already ahead. It's like, when you're over a bad relationship, it's like it can't hurt you. So
right, yeah. So that gets into Gnostic politics, and I say that it's testing transgressivity. I think in a sense, scholars like April DeConnick are right that part of the Gnostic mentality or cognitive frame, as she calls it, is transgressive esotericism, and it is transgressive, but it's transgressive in that very confident way that you're talking about. It's not like transgressive in the sense that, oh my God, I'm a Ukrainian and some evil warlord dictator has invaded my country, taken 20% of it, and is bombing my cities, and I'm helpless. The Gnostic is like so far above, like the Gnosis brings them so far above that dictator that if they look at that dictator, it is just with a sense of contempt, and they don't focus and fixate on like rage. Like you will see some statements in the Nag Hammadi library that sound like they could come from rage. I'm not denying that. But really, the overall attitude of the Gnostic is amazingly confident and positive. And that's why I think, I've written this book as a kind of like anti-Hans Jonas version of Gnosticism, because Jonas really put that emphasis on pessimism.
Mhm.
And I just don't see it. I just don't see them, weeping in the corner of their kitchen, about the Demiurge. They really don't do that. If anything, Plotinus and Irenaeus are complaining that they think that they've already soared above the stars. And they're already, they're not just dancing with the stars, they're way up in the transcendent realm, halfway to the pleroma in the eighth
Yeah.
realm. I mean, these guys aren't worried about these dicks in the lower heavens. And they've got the passwords, right? They've
Mhm.
got the passwords. So why would you be worried? Anyway.
No, you're right, and like you said, it's not like they knew that they couldn't do anything. Like you said, they couldn't vote for a new emperor because it wasn't a democracy. Just like today, as you astutely say, we can complain about the war here or the middle class there, but we're going to pay taxes, and those taxes are going to go to things we hate. We have no control. Wars, the poor aren't going to be taken care of. So it's almost like transform yourself, and like Valentinus said, or go feed the poor, help those who are helpless, do what you can in your community. Start there.
Yeah, Gnostic ethics it's not quietist, but I say it's not anarchic revolution either. You have to give to Caesar what's Caesar's. But in the end, that's just because Caesar doesn't matter. But you give matter to the lords of matter. You give money to those who print money. And in the end, it's a meaningless transaction. Of course, there are some exceptions. I mean, there are truly Gnostic monks who literally try to get off the grid and try not to have a social security number and live in the woods somewhere. In Egypt, actually, you might have been able to pull that off just by going to the desert. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. And certainly, if you don't want your tax dollars to go to bombs, then yes, you have to find some place in the woods and build a cabin somewhere. It's becoming increasingly difficult to do that. So the normal, the more common attitude is, to be politically active in a local sense, which is, being involved in, as you say, just common deeds of human kindness, telling people about the light, but also giving them a piece of bread. I mean, it's not rocket science. If the U.S. government is going to spend, your tax dollars on building bigger bombs, well, what do? You go to the local soup kitchen, or you find a charity that's not a scam and start feeding people that are actually hungry.
Right.
And it's not rocket science. You put your money where you think it should be.
Very well said indeed. And yeah, I want to get to the part of secret knowledge, but I was also thinking about this really cool Pythagorean woman you talked about, or talk about political and, taking a stance of what you believe. She was caught by some tyrant, and she either had a vow of silence, or he wanted to know about the secrets of the Pythagoreans. And instead of talking, she bit off her own tongue in front of him. I was like, whoo. That's an activist, right, David?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean, every act is in a sense political as well. Every act that has an effect on another human being is in a sense political. And yeah, definitely, that's a great example of someone who, she's asked to reveal one of the secrets of the Pythagorean tradition, and she just sits there, slowly bites off her own tongue and spits it out. So it's an amazing story. And yeah, there are Gnostic martyrs. The funny thing that people don't realize is that in antiquity, Gnostics and Orthodox, they died together on the same stake. Like we have stories of Marcionites being tied to the same stake as the Orthodox bishop. So like the Marcionite pastor is tied to the same stake as the Orthodox pastor, and they're both lit up in flames. And I just wonder what their conversation was, as they were being, lit on fire. But when it comes down to it, like that's it. Like both of those groups were not willing to compromise on certain things. So it's not like they're hiding in a corner. When the time comes, you do have to step up. Absolutely.
Agreed.
That
Yes,
may
for
be
the
coming to America soon. So
yeah. Well, don't bite your tongue and spit it out on the screen yet, David. Let's wait a little bit longer. Yeah, it all comes for us. Yeah, for the audience, if you have any questions, please super chat them so that we can get to them. Vance, do you have a question? I know you were talking about Archons or wondering about.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was thinking about exploring the history of the Demiurge and so forth a little more deeply. I know in Plotinus, and as far as back as Plato, they talked about the Demiurge, right, as the beneficial creator of the good world and so forth. Before we get to that, though, I did have a short question about in Genesis we have the Elohists and the Yahwists, right? In the first chapter of Genesis is the sounds like a nicer God, and then the second chapter of Genesis is the kind of the Gnostic demiurge, so to speak. I think the ones that the Gnostics recognized wasn't really the true God. Well, what do you think about that? You think the Elohim God was closer to the God above God or the transcendent God, or was he just another form? What do you think about that?
Well, of course, in antiquity and in ancient Alexandria, they didn't have JEDP and Wellhausen and his discovery of the different sources, but they were very, very good readers. So if you read Philo is a great example of someone who says, "What is Genesis 1 about?" Well, he recognizes that that's about basically the creation of the Platonic forms. And then we only get to the material creation when we get to Genesis 2, as you say. So he's not recognizing an Elohist source in Genesis 1, and he's not recognizing a Yahwist source in Genesis 2. But he is recognizing that they're talking about two fundamentally different acts of creation. And the creation of the forms, or the generation of the forms, that world of ideas, is going to look fundamentally different than anything in the world of matter. But Philo is traditional Alexandrian who would say that, yeah, the high God doesn't do any kind of creation, and especially he doesn't ever touch human beings, because he doesn't. I mean, the crass way of saying this is he doesn't want to get his hands dirty, but he doesn't want to be involved with any being that has the potential for moral corruption. That's really what Philo is concerned about, and that's what a lot of people are concerned about with demiurgy. So they are distinguishing different kinds or different types of gods. They're seeing continuity, but they're saying that, yes, there's a high God who generates the aeons and the rest of the forms, not creates, but generates. That's a difference. And then there's a demiurgic character. But of course, Philo is going to be more concerned to kind of like clean up the character of that lower demiurge in Genesis 2, whereas the Gnostics are going to be concerned about emphasizing the idiocy, stupidity, jealousy, and malevolence of that. So there's the difference.
Right.
Same presuppositions, but different readings. Yeah.
Yeah, I've said this before, but have you noticed that they slid the end of chapter 1 around so that they're trying to make it look like it was the same entity? Because I think they overlapped I'm starting to forget now, they overlapped a little bit of chapter 1 into chapter 2, but the actual demarcation is really a little further back.
Right. Well, fair enough. Yeah, the chapter divisions are actually medieval, but in the sense that there's a fuzzy border between that first hebdomadic creation, the 7-day creation, and the single-day creation in what we now call Genesis 2. There's a fuzzy border, and the sort of intervening verses, these are the generations of heaven and earth.
Yeah,
and we don't know if that's summing up the previous story or that's introducing the next story. So yeah, there's definitely a fuzzy border there, which is interesting. But even in the Hebrew Bible, it's clear that they're trying to mix those two deities, because they call him Yahweh Elohim, right? That's the direct name that they call him. So it's a binomial. That is, it's a double name. So they're already trying to convince you that that's the same dude, even though, yes, you're right. Genesis Genesis 1 primarily uses Elohim, but when you get into Genesis 2, it's Yahweh Elohim, and they use that binomial throughout the whole Torah.
Very clever. So how about the Demiurge? What do you have to say about the evolution of the Demiurge from between the Greeks and then the Romans and everybody else, including Gnostics, Christians?
Well, I guess I have the reputation of being the expert on Demiurgy, and yeah, it's it's definitely one piece of the Gnostic puzzle, right? But as I said to Miguel, it's a piece of that puzzle that you need to realize that everybody's kind of like a demiurgist. Like any intellectual is a demiurgist because they have those concerns about creation. Like it is in a sense that everyone who's an intellectual assumes that God is blessed. And what does it mean to be blessed, which is Makarios in Greek? What does it mean to be blessed? It means not to be disturbed. And so any deity who gets involved in the world of change, movement, and matter has the ability to be affected by that, and to be disturbed by that, right? So across the board, you have people moving the high God away from that world of movement and change and disarray. And the Platonists are doing it. I mean, Epicureans are saying that, well, God just doesn't get involved at all. The world is completely random, right? Creation is random. They're sort of like modern scientific materialists. We just got here. We don't know how. We know that God's not involved because if he got involved, he wouldn't be happy. So that idea is actually very common. And so the Gnostic, their contribution, and they're all, these are Christians, their contribution is to say, well, yeah, this isn't the best of possible worlds. Somebody is effing with the system.
Right.
And so that being must be malevolent. Whereas no one's willing to go with the malevolence bit. But it's important to understand that, yeah, Valentinus doesn't go there. I don't think Carpocrates goes there. It's really only Sethians, Marcionites, and Manichaeans that go there. And they make up maybe, if you view Gnosticism in a broad sense, they make up maybe 25% of the pie. So I keep emphasizing that the evil creator, that is distinctively Gnostic in the sense that they're the only people saying that the creator is bad, right? Like out loud and in your face, bad. But at the same time, yeah, they're only one piece of the larger Gnostic pie, I think. And I think, here on Aeon Byte, you would want to also talk about Valentinus, who's much, much closer to Plato on this regard. He's much, much more willing to say, yeah, there's a lower being. He's done an okay job based on what he can know, right? Mm-hmm. But we're better than him by nature. And so, yeah, there's where you get that superiority.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which doesn't result in arrogance, by the way. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't want to be unilaterally bashing Demiurge on the Aeon Byte, although we talk badly about the Archons a lot, but we want to see all the aspects, definitely, which is why we love you being here.
Yeah. But I think there's more. I mean, Simon Magus as well, if we go by the other sources about the angels taking over, and of course Paul's talking about the God of this world, and the Book of Enoch's talking about the Watcher. So it was, I mean, even beyond Gnosticism, there were some people fed up with middle management, right, David? Like, what is going on here? Give us where's the CEO? Can we send him an email or something?
The pointy-haired boss.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So absolutely there are evil angels, but and you're absolutely right about this, that we should just call a spade, right? Mm-hmm. what Christians do is they fudge on this, and Jews do this as well. They say, well, the evil angels aren't angels anymore; they're demons. So that's a different category.
Mm.
But of
For the
course, not
Gospel of
really.
Mark is Satan who rules all the
Right.
kingdoms of the world. It's his fault now.
Right. I mean, regardless of how you class them, yeah, middle management is a nice category that brings those two groups together. So absolutely, I mean, it's a complex development, but so Enoch, there's evil angels. They don't create anything in the sense that they're not making trees and rocks,
Right.
but they are doing some crafty things like primitive, what we would call like, I don't sciences, early sciences like astrology and metallurgy. That's their contribution. So in a sense, that's creative, but it's really only in these second century Alexandrian thinkers who want to fully push the idea of angelic creation, and they're like that angels are actually getting together and like making trees and human bodies. And yeah, once you make that step, then yeah, you have a kind of like collective negative demiurgy, right? So you don't blame one guy, but you can blame the whole middle management, which I'm sure happens in like modern companies.
Yeah, the whole corporation.
Yeah, all the corporation. Yeah. So absolutely.
Oh yeah, the executive vice presidents.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it makes it, pretty logical what they were doing. And also, let's talk about the secret knowledge, because again, even today I hear, right-wing pastors and others, these Gnostics and their secret knowledge. That's why they're so dangerous and still are. But what do you say with this, to me, again, silly idea that they had some sort of secret knowledge? Again, it's more nuanced, right, David?
Right. I mean, if Gnostics based everything on secret knowledge, we wouldn't know anything about it, right? I mean, they must have been very, very stupid people. Like, if everything is secret, like, why would you publish a book on it? It's like me
can
saying,
I bring in a sexist joke that maybe they had too many women leaders and it just kept getting leaked out? I had to do it. Sorry, people in the chat. You can cancel me. Leave David and Vance alone. But anyway, keep on. Sorry.
But in the sense that, yeah, like the Gospel of Thomas opens with the saying, "These are the secret sayings of Jesus," and like anyone who's reading them is like, no, they're not. Not if you publish them, you idiot. I mean, but they're not idiots, right?
Right.
Why do they say that it's secret? They say that it's secret because that is essentially part of an advertisement. I mean, when you think of it today, like we see like 10,000 advertisements a day, and a good many of those are like, oh, did you learn this one? Not many people know about this one, like, and that's an advertisement technique. That has nothing to do with whether people know it or not know it, right? That's an advertisement technique. So how are you going to get readers of your new Jesus book? Well, you're going to say the sayings are secret. And why are you going to say the sayings are secret? Well, because they weren't known beforehand. Why weren't they known beforehand? Well, because you just wrote them down, but so it's like, well, obviously they didn't know it because you hadn't published it. You hadn't, invented the saying. So, and this is where we get into like the weeds here, because these right-winger evangelical pastors are essentially also wanting to say that the Gnostic knowledge of Jesus that you get is worthless because it's all later. But of course, Gnostic knowledge, in a sense, like if it is a transcendent mode of knowing, then it's neither later or earlier. It's timeless,
Right.
and it doesn't matter. It can, like, I can write a Gnostic book today. Maybe I will. I'll just publish it as, Zostrianus or something like that, or Zarathustra. And it can be filled with Gnostic insights that are just as valid today as they were, well, 1 billion years ago, even when there were no readers. So it has nothing to do with time, but it has everything to do with getting people to read your book. And that's why I say that the vast majority of Gnostic secrecy is simply an open secrecy. So people who want to compare Gnostics to the mystery cults actually, this is a real difference because the mystery cults are actually keeping the secrets.
Mhm.
Whereas the Gnostics, they can't wait to tell you about the secrets. I mean, they're publishing book after book after book. And it's like, whoa, cool. Here's all the secrets. And any dude or gal can pick up the book in a bookstore. Don't go to a Christian bookstore, but, go someplace like an old used bookstore in your back alley, and anyone can pick up a Gnostic book and start reading it because it's public knowledge once it's in the book, right? So the secrecy means something else. It's not literal. Like so many other things in Gnosticism, they're not speaking on a literal level.
Very true. And also too, it should be mentioned, yeah, it's secret that you'll only get it when you're ready, like the Gospel of Thomas. You're supposed to interpret and find what works for you. It's such a personal text. That's why I love it, because it's meant for your awakening and you and your Christ. But as Elaine Pagel said, Orthodoxy was kindergarten and Gnosticism was your master's degree, because you are going into a really initiatory level. You're going to learn about Greek philosophy, Zoroastrianism. You're going to have to do vows of silence and purify your body for months for these rituals. So it really was like grad school, and it was a commitment to get to that level intellectually, physically, and all that. It wasn't just be a pew potato on Sundays and then don't go sin no more or something. And as you point out too, very astutely, David, the biggest Gnostic of all was Jesus, right? Peter, don't tell anybody who I am. Oh, the parables are for the idiots. We got the secrets over here, guys. So Jesus was Mr. Secret Knowledge.
That's right. Yeah. And that's the truth of the Gospel of Thomas. Yeah. I'm teaching an online course on the Gospel of Thomas right now. And, scholars are so embarrassed about the fact that, we don't want to say Thomas is Gnostic, because what do they want to do? They want to redeem the sayings to get them early enough so that they can get to the historical Jesus. But that's not the real Jesus. In fact, Thomas doesn't care about history. He doesn't say that Jesus is from Galilee, or that he's Jewish, or he's born, or he's the son of Mary, or the son of Joseph. All that is a bunch of hoo-ha, a bunch of myth, a bunch of garbage, right? The true Jesus has always been the timeless Jesus, the light shining above them all. It doesn't matter if he was in Galilee or not. This is what is so, like, the Gospel of Thomas is the best medicine to all, like, the mythicism, because mythicism is, in a sense, it's based on that Enlightenment presupposition. The mythicists and the evangelicals agree that, oh, hey, yeah, if you're going to have truth, it has to be historical. Bullshit. It doesn't have to be historical. It's got nothing to do with history. It's timeless. And until you realize that, you won't be ready. I think the saying about being ready is very important. So yes, of course, the Gnostic Jesus is the true Jesus. And that's the Jesus who can appear and slap you in the face anytime, in any generation, and doesn't have to be in Galilee. So save your money on that, vacation to Israel. I mean, it's not a good time to go anyway, but, don't kiss the ground where Jesus walked. That wasn't Jesus. That wasn't Jesus who walked the shores of Galilee. That was some other dude, some husk, the man of Elohim. That was some guy who got his butt nailed to a cross. Nobody who knows Jesus, truly, as a Gnostic knows Jesus, thinks that that's Jesus. So save your money, donate it to good causes, such as Bite, and make a statement.
The Christ within, the hope of glory, as Paul says very astutely. And the Gospel of Thomas, like you, I don't worry about it, because I'm like, look, this Jesus didn't die for your sins, but he's bringing knowledge, like the Gnostic. He's bringing this information that hopefully you'll have your awakening. So he's a very different Jesus. He's closer to Gnosticism than he is to Orthodoxy in that way.
Right. And Orthodoxy fucked itself, right? So you've got Nietzsche in the 19th century pointing out that in order for any Orthodox good news to work, you've got to create a story where you have bad news in front of it, right? So you've got to have the dis-angel before the you-angel, right? And you've got to create this story of sin and the fall and the Garden of Eden and a crafty snake who's really Satan. and death and war and bloodshed, and you're gonna emphasize all that pessimistic crap before you're like, oh, and I have a message for you. So you've got to create the situation. Just look at a Billy Graham sermon. Like a Billy Graham sermon always has two parts to it. Life is shit. I've got the message to get you out of the life of shit. But whoever said that life was shit? Billy Graham said that life was shit. He constructed that world for the audience. And then the audience was like, oh, please, please take me out of that life of shit. The Gnostic says, you're not. That's not like that. That's not the Gnostic trick, right? That's the Orthodox trick. It's a mind trick, right? The Gnostic says, you're already redeemed, you just don't know it. And everything that you consider shit is a shadow anyway. So don't shed a tear. Honestly, you're walking through the veil of tears. Stop crying. Stop crying. There's no reason to cry. You don't have a job? Don't cry about it. People hate you. There's a dictator as president. Stop crying. Don't complain to me. As if we should be surprised. Like, oh, the Archons are bad. Oh my God, the Archons are bad. Have they ever been good?
Yeah, what do you expect?
You voted for it, so you deserve everything that's coming to you. Not to be sort of like sadistic or anything, but I know a lot of people didn't vote for that, but in the sense that we sort of get what we deserve. And if you're putting any faith or hope in this world of shadows, you're going to get bit in the ass, right?
And that's a good point, David, because I do remember when Catholic or going to Protestant funerals or whatever, the priest gets up, is like, he's in a better place. He no longer suffers in his veil of tears. And I'm like thinking back, man, they were giving some Gnostic kind of discourses at the funerals. So
absolutely. That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, it's not that the Orthodox are in a state of misrecognition. They want to say that our tradition is fundamentally different. But again, they've simply adapted it. They've adapted the discourses and they've timed their use of the discourses in order to make people feel good. Because in the end, yeah, we all do have the same problem. This husk gets wrinkly and it shuts down and just stops working. No one has figured out how to avoid that, not even Jesus. So we're kind of in the same boat, and what you need is a message that will make people feel better. And so, yeah, when the rubber meets the road and you're actually at a funeral, they'll use the Gnostic message because, frankly, it makes people feel better. Yeah. And of course, it should, because it's true.
It's true. Yeah, it is true.
That's what makes it true.
So the Hermeticists are being kind of sneaky, because isn't that what the Corpus Hermeticus does? Hermes is like, body bad, universe bad, and then flips. Oh, the good news is there's this Poimandris. So the Hermeticists kind of use that same playbook too. Now that I think about it.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, so I've that's interesting, because I've organized in my book Hermetica 1, I've organized it along the path of initiation. So yes, the argument is that early on in the stages of initiation, all that they're trying to do is get you out of the matrix, right? Mm-hmm. Because the reality is, and that's really like a pre-initiation move. Like you run up to someone in the street that you've never met and just slap them in the face and say, "You're drunk. This world is an illusion. Get out of here." You see, it's really just an attempt to do ontological shock. But then when they have hooked you, and I'm not saying that it's not, like an advertisement. It is like an advertisement. But ultimately, yeah, when you actually go through the initiation, you're absolutely right. That's not how they talk about the world. That's not at all how they talk about the world. They're cosmotheists in the end. Like, so if you get them, in a hushed, shrine, they're going to say, yeah, well, the world is God. And of course, that's what makes them different than the Gnostics, right? But that initial shock to try to get you out of the matrix, will use that to bring you into the group, basically.
No, that makes sense. Well, at least I guess Morpheus was honest in the Matrix, because he gave them the pill and the world wasn't getting better and he didn't sell them anything. It's like, no, Neo, it's it's bad, it's bad, it's it's bad till the end. So, Vance, super chats as we start getting closer to the hour.
Yeah, we got a few of them actually. First of all, let's acknowledge Freighter RC Hermetic Podcast for appreciating the show we have today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And first, Greek Informant has actually asked two questions. Here's the first one. Would you go as far as to say Christianity is a Hellenistic religion?
Well, what else would it be? I mean, a Hindu one or Indian one? I mean, I guess, you know, the Orthodox
Jewish.
I was going to say, yeah, the Orthodox want to convince you that it's a Jewish religion, right? And that orthodoxy has seeped into scholarship so that, you know, after the Holocaust, we want to emphasize Christianity's Jewish heritage, and to say that it has any other heritage is to not sufficiently recognize or honor the contribution of Judaism. So that's a place where religious or theological orthodoxy meets academic orthodoxy, and it's got, you know, an ecumenical, nice sounding kind of a way of going about it. But in the end, I would say that if you're really doing history, well, you realize that what we call Judaism in the ancient world was also a Hellenistic religion.
Right,
so it's like circles within circles, right? So there's Hellenistic religion. Judaism is one of those. Christianity is another. So within the larger circle of Hellenistic Judaism, or of Hellenistic religions, you've got Judaism. And within that circle, you've got Christianity. But of course, Christianity doesn't want to be an obedient son. So it pushes its way out of Judaism I would say very swiftly. If you read, well, it's not swiftly for everyone, but if you read the Gospel of Thomas, I mean, there's not a single good thing said about Jews or Judaism. And we just need to frankly acknowledge these people, yeah, they don't like Judaism. And there's no way around it. Marcion didn't like Judaism. Yeah, true, fine, go with it. You know, he's not going to be politically correct. That's not the same thing as saying, of course, that they didn't like Jews. Of course, there's a world of difference between that. I think they would have had a fine conversation with Jews, and they would have recognized the intellectual contribution of Jews. But it's the Judaism that they're all running from. And I think the early Alexandrians get to this more quickly, because in their context, and I've got a book on this, Early Christianity in Alexandria. In that context, you had a massive Jewish pogrom, essentially, that happened in the city in 115 and 116. So basically, the Jews were wiped out. And then the Christians were like, okay, what do we do now? Well, we can't do Judaism. Let's just do us. So that's a very crass way of putting it, but that's more or less why that happened, that, you know, they had to form their own identities more quickly in that context, where basically the competition was wiped out almost overnight. The Romans literally came in and cut the throats of the Jewish people, burned every synagogue, and what was left was just a shamble.
I heard then the Jews came back when Hadrian had a war, and they also wiped out a lot of the pagans too. It was kind of going back and forth. It was their vengeance.
Well, so that the war in Hadrian's time was in Palestine. It wasn't in Alexandria. But yeah, I'm not saying that, you know, it wasn't like a successful, like 100% extermination.
Right,
obviously,
right.
Some Jews remained, and some Jews did migrate back to Alexandria. But yeah, the population went from, I mean, Philo says that there's 1 million Jews in Egypt, and the population went from, you know, that to about maybe 10,000. I mean,
Wow.
it's we don't have exact numbers.
That's genocide.
Yeah, but it's basically, yeah, it's the first systematic pogrom that no one really hears about. But it completely decimated them, culturally at least. Yeah.
Wow. Another
Well, how about
super chat? No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask real quick. I was a little confused about the Christianity being sounding so disconnected from Judaism. What about all the references to, I'm fulfilling that Jesus in the Gospels say that he's fulfilling the scriptures in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament being the Torah and all that.
Well, yeah, no, there's a wing of Christianity, but recognize that as a reaction, right? They're already reacting to someone like Marcion who's saying that, no, the prophecies don't refer to Jesus. How could they refer to Jesus? The prophecies are clearly referring to a military kind of a type of entity who is going to take over the empire. And Jesus just didn't do that. I mean, look at the history books. Like, you can spiritualize it away, but the fact is there's no way that that guy fulfills prophecies. So in an attempt to, as Nietzsche said, pull out the rug from under the feet of the Jews, that is to claim the Jewish heritage secondarily, you've got Orthodox Christians in Rome and elsewhere really, really searching the scriptures, as they say, and trying to find every last thread in the Old Testament. They think that that points to Christ. But obviously, that's a reaction, and that gets very ridiculous. Go read Nietzsche on this. He's got some hilarious things to say. Like, wherever these Christians found a piece of wood in the Old Testament, or a switch, or really anything made of wood, they thought, oh my God, that's the cross. Like,
The cross.
no, it's not. I mean, talk to any Jew. Like, it's literally the Bible that the Christians are reading, they're inventing. Like, any Jew would tell you that ain't the cross, and you got to be fucking out of your mind to think so. I mean, like, literally, like, it's that difference in interpretation. And Jews don't stand up and say this today, but of course they believe that. They don't believe any of this Christian prophecy stuff. They never did, because it sounds crazy. And even the Christians are embarrassed now.
Yeah, back then, of course, as you were talking about that fallacy of time, the older your religion was, the more pedigree you would have. So Christians wanted to have some gravitas, so they said Judaism is perfect. And it's a dying religion. It's like you said, it's almost been wiped out a few times in the 2nd century. They can't defend themselves.
Well, they wanted to appropriate the good, like, they didn't actually want to follow the rituals, but yeah, they wanted to steal the history, right? So, if you're a classic liberal humanist, you have to look at Orthodox Christianity as undergoing the biggest like act of appropriation ever. Sorry. They have stolen the history of the Jews, as Nietzsche said.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we got to get on to the next super chat here, because I see your voice is starting to fade. Doing a great job, though.
Secret knowledge is coming now. You won't understand them.
Okay. Do you think Judaism, monotheism, and Genesis are being articulated and informed by Plato and the Timaeus?
Sure. After Plato and Timaeus. Yeah. I mean, after they were written. Certainly. I mean, these questions, like, it's just like yes and yes. I mean, like, I can go further into it, but I mean, to me, these questions are just so obvious. Like, who says that they weren't? If you're thinking of 2nd century Alexandria, like, yeah, Plato and Genesis, Plato's in one hand, Genesis is in the other. Like, there's not a.
But Genesis definitely came first.
Well, I mean,
I'm talking about historically, because there are some Orthodox Christians, you know what they say, Moses influenced Plato. I don't know if you've heard these strange theories.
Well, sure. But even like historically, if you think that they roughly happened at the same time, or they were roughly written at the same time, Timaeus and Genesis, by which you might, the final version of Genesis in Greek is after Plato, actually.
Right, that's true.
So you the translation is at least after Plato. So the translators and the interpreters of Genesis are all informed by Plato. So of course.
All righty, let's see. We got Chasing Mound Builders, and he says, Hey, the Hermetica class was such a treat. I have a feeling you know this guy, maybe. What do you make of the prophecy in Asclepius about the return of the Hermetic traditions?
Great. Well, first of all, I should say I really appreciate everyone taking my online courses. It's one of the ways that I survive as a scholar. And so, I'll share with Miguel the link to check out the courses. I hope everyone will take a look at it. I mean, you're not going to find these courses anywhere else because, frankly, no one's teaching the Hermetica, that I know of. At Bethel Bible College, and they're not even teaching it
Definitely not.
Calgary or wherever. They're just not teaching the Hermetica. So I've written on it. I've got a class on it. I've got lots and lots of other classes. So please take that opportunity. Whoops, we lost the question, Vance. Could we go back to the question?
Oh, sure.
Yes, Asclepius' prophecy that Hermeticism would return.
Oh, did I get the wrong one? I got the wrong
You're
one.
still on.
There we go.
Yeah. So the return of the Hermetic traditions. Yeah. Well, if you have a Hermetical one, this is referring to that the Hermetic apocalypse where Hermes is saying, Egypt, that the gods have left you. And yeah, some take that as pessimistic. I'm glad that you take that in a slightly more optimistic sense. I don't see, though. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Maybe you can share the passage with us. I'm not sure what you mean by a return of Hermetic traditions. But
yeah, I know it talks about the end of Egypt, but nothing about Hermeticism making a comeback. Don't call it a comeback.
Yeah. Anyway, if you're thinking of something specific, just let me know.
Wonderful. Yeah, let us know. And I do appreciate the super chats and the support. And yeah. Oh, thanks a lot.
Don't want to forget Anon.
Yeah, Anonymous, Astrax Foundation. Really appreciate your support. Yeah, and definitely check out David's book and definitely his courses. Yeah, as we're getting to the end, that's one last question. Please indulge me, David. I was rereading Stephen Davis's translation of the Secret Book of John, and he talks about, yelled about doing the flood, but he calls it a flood of darkness, like almost like a giant memory wipe from Men in Black or something like that. Can you read it that it wasn't a flood of water, but a flood of amnesia?
Oh yeah, no, it's obvious. Yeah, no.
Okay.
The Secret Book of John is saying that the flood has nothing to do with water.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
It has absolutely nothing to do with water. So all these people like trying to prove that there was a great flood are the stupidest people on earth. It had nothing to do with water.
No.
Like that's the Gnostic view. It had to do with a flood of ignorance. Everyone got really, really stupid because they were invaded by the dark spirit, the pneuma antimimon, with
counterfeit spirit,
variously translated. Yeah, I'm not even sure how they translate it, but the anti-imitative spirit. Yeah, the spirit who's imitating the Holy Spirit has created the ignorance, and so yeah, Noah didn't build a boat. There was no water. Stop those stupid archaeological digs. I know you're still looking for the boat in Turkey. Stop being an idiot. Stop being an idiot, okay?
Well, another story is Noria breathes fire and destroys it. So either way.
Well, then we'd never find it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It was a flood of darkness. See, even the Gnostics would not have their gods drown kittens and puppies and babies in water.
Thank God. Yeah, they were decent.
Too bad the flood hasn't receded then, huh?
Yeah, we're still in the middle, deep in the waters of ignorance.
Still drowning.
We need an ark.
Hey, you want to see Chasing Mound Builders was thinking, he had a few things to say about what he was referring to. He's thinking of the lament. And he said,
in the lament, if you can find language in there that talks about a comeback or a Hermetic revival, I'd be interested. I don't see that. You might be mixing in another passage, that's totally fine if you are. But hey, I love the Hermetica, and I always have something to learn. So let me know what you find.
We shall. Well, definitely. Well, we are getting at the end. Again, appreciate the super chats. I really appreciate your support. As I mentioned in our last show, with my situation getting screwed over by my podcast provider, that they won't pay me till months down the road, and being in a financial pickle. Many of you have come through, and I really appreciate it to get me through this month until that money comes in, and the Elvis royalties and all that, which will be months now. So I do appreciate your support. Please support me in any way you can as I try. I mean, David understands, and freelancers and content creators, all it takes is one company not paying you or one thing going down, and you're just scrambling to make ends meet. It's just the world that is today, whether you're a content creator or a freelancer. I had issues when I used to freelance, copywriting, everything. Yeah, one client goes on vacation and doesn't pay me, and I'm like, where is he? Where is he? And he gets back from Europe weeks later. Oh, sorry, I didn't pay you, Miguel. So yeah, really appreciate support and those who've helped. It's really helped. But certainly support David, get his book, and I have it on the show notes. Tell more where else. Tell the audience where to go to and what you got install in your courses and other places.
Yeah, so the Gnostic archive, which you can sign up for free, get a daily post about latest research in Gnostic studies, Gnostic and Nagamati studies. That's mdavidlitwa.com, mdavidlitwa.com. It's just my name. And on the tab there for courses, you can see the whole suite of my online courses. If you want them all in a single subscription, join the Gnosis Academy. That's how you get them all. I'll be releasing them all by the end of the year. It'll just be that single subscription, and that's 12 courses. So that's a lot. Obviously, stop by the YouTube channel. Members of the YouTube channel get perks, early release videos, and some of my course videos. And obviously, if you're on Patreon, please consider joining. I've got a lot of unique content there as well.
Yes, I just saw you recently had a chat with Mr. Jeff Kripal. I didn't know you guys were friends. I've been friends for 15 years, and he was one of my beta test readers for Elvis, and he gave me the stamp of approval, and I was like, okay, if Kripal approves of something, it's good. So, but yeah, I want to be a fly in the wall. I'm sure you guys had a great interview, right?
Yeah, well, that'll be released in the coming days. But yeah, if you want early access, hop on the Patreon, and that's what I do with all the videos. Yeah, Jeff, everyone should know about Jeff. He's a friend, and we don't have many friends in the Academy. He's a giant, and everyone should know about him and the resources that he gives for people serious about spirituality, mixing real scholarship with spirituality, which is, it's my MO.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, I'm sure it's a great conversation. So awesome. Yeah, I think that's it. Tomorrow we will have a show mixing theurgy and Aikido. Yes, there is a connection. We're going to find out tomorrow. So I hope to see everybody there. But first, I'll say, Vance, thanks for keeping us company. I hope you got that Gnosis tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And was disappointed that we didn't get to talk about the divine spark, but we can do that next time.
We did at the beginning.
Well, you have it already.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, all right. I'm all set.
So yeah, David, as always, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Again, the book is excellent. Go support David. It's great to have a new generation of people like David and Justin Sledge and others, where you can get this high quality education that is useful for your own life and for your own contemplative existence. And it's a fraction of the cost, and having to go to academia was still the same quality. So David, thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, guys. Yeah. And everyone here, please take care and be well, and fight the good fight. Know that your souls and spirits are above every dictator. So make it count.
I agree. I love how you, in one part of your book, and this almost brought tears to my eyes. You say, "Does the Gnostic love God? If so, how can one love what is unknown? It is sufficient for the Gnostic to be loved by God, and so truly to discover what love is." In other words, don't worry. You know, the forces above are always there helping you out, and they like us a lot, right, David?
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, everybody else, take care. Have a good night, and we shall talk soon. Bye, everybody.